When you have lived long enough to bury friends, raise children, and watch the world change 3 times over, you realize the most dangerous thing you ever did was answer every question people threw at you. 75 years taught me one sacred truth. Not every question deserves your energy, and not every opinion deserves your reply. You know, I have been asked that question more times than I can count. At the dinner table, at family gatherings, by my grandchildren holding their little glowing screens in front of my face like they are showing me a miracle, and maybe to them it is one. I do not dismiss what they feel, but I want you to sit with me for a moment, because what I am about to tell you took me the better part of 7 decades to understand. I have watched technology come into this world in waves. I was a young man when the television became a household fixture, and people were afraid it would destroy conversation. Then came the microwave, the answering machine, the computer, each one arriving with the same breathless announcement that this was the thing that would change everything. And each time there were people like me who said, I will learn it when I need to. I will use it when it serves me. And there were people who said, if you do not keep up, you will be left behind. Here is what I discovered, friends. I was never left behind. I arrived everywhere I needed to go, on my own terms, in my own time. So when someone looks at me, at this face, these hands, this life, and asks why I do not live inside a screen the way they do, I want them to understand something quietly, without argument, without defensiveness. My pace of living was never a deficiency. It was a choice. A deliberate, earned, and deeply personal choice. The man who has walked 75 years on this earth has already proven he can adapt. I did not need a social media account to get through the hard years. I needed character. I needed patience. I needed the kind of wisdom that is only built by sitting with problems long enough to watch them resolve themselves. There is a difference between technology being useful and technology being your master. Young people today sometimes confuse the two. They scroll through their phones at the breakfast table, at funerals, at birthdays, at moments that once demanded your full and undivided presence. And then they turn to me, to someone who still looks out the window in the morning and simply watches the light change, and they ask me what is wrong with my relationship to the modern world. I want to laugh, truly, because the question reveals more about them than it ever could about me. I use what I need to use. I have learned what was worth learning. My grandchildren showed me how to send a voice message, and I treasure that because it means I can hear their laughter even when they are far. But I did not surrender my morning walks, my handwritten letters, my habit of reading a real book before bed, just to prove I was current. Current is not the same as alive. And I intend to be fully, deliberately, joyfully alive for whatever time I have left. So the next time someone, a neighbor, a younger relative, a well-meaning stranger, asks you why you do not live the way everyone else does, I want you to simply smile. Not because you have no answer, but because your answer is your life itself. And your life, every single day of it, speaks louder than any explanation you could give. A man who has already lived a full life does not need to explain himself to someone who has not yet finished theirs. And if this truth speaks to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Welcome to Evergreen Wisdom. If you find value here, subscribe and walk this road with us. Let me tell you something about that question, because I have heard it in so many forms over the years that I could fill a book with its variations. Are you sure you should be driving still? Are you sure you want to take that trip? Are you sure that is not too heavy for you? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? As though reaching a certain number of years on this earth means you must now ask permission to live in it. I want to be clear about something. I understand that behind some of those questions, there is genuine love. A daughter who worries, a son who loses sleep. I do not dismiss that care, and I never will. Love is love, even when it stumbles over itself and comes out sounding like doubt. But there is another version of that question, the one that does not come from love at all. It comes from a place of quiet assumption, the assumption that age is a ceiling, that somewhere past 60, past 70, a person crosses a line and becomes fragile by default, uncertain, diminished. And that version of the question, that one, I refuse to answer. Because the moment you begin explaining yourself to someone else's fear, you start living inside their limitations instead of your own possibilities. I have planted gardens at 73. I have walked trails at 74 that younger men turned back from, not to prove something to anyone watching, but because my body still had the will, my lungs still wanted the air, and my spirit was not ready to sit down and wait. There is a particular cruelty in being made to feel that your ambition has an expiration date, that your desire to do, to build, to move through the world with purpose somehow becomes inappropriate the older you get. I reject that entirely. The truth is, most people who ask that question have never stopped to examine what they are really saying. They see gray hair, and they make a calculation, a lazy, careless calculation, that gray hair equals diminished capacity. But gray hair means seasons. It means survival. It means that whatever life has thrown at this body and this mind, both are still here, still standing, still deciding what comes next. So here is what I want you to carry with you. When someone questions your ability based on your age, you do not owe them a defense. You do not owe them a list of your accomplishments, your doctor's approval, or your personal history of resilience. What you owe yourself is this: to lace up your shoes, to lift what you came to lift, to walk the road you chose, and to let the living itself be your only reply. Do not shrink yourself to fit inside someone else's idea of what you should be at this age. The world has enough small lives already, and yours was never meant to be one of them. You want to know why I have gone quiet? Sit down. Let me tell you something I should have said a long time ago. I spent the better part of 50 years making noise. Not the kind you hear at parties, the kind that fills a house. The sound of a father getting up before the sun, shoes on the floor at 5 in the morning, leaving before anyone else stirred. The sound of arguments I swallowed so the dinner table would stay peaceful. The sound of a man clearing his throat when he had something heavy on his chest, choosing instead to say, "I'm fine, eat your food." That was my noise, and I made it every single day, without applause, without anyone stopping to say, "We hear you." So yes, now I am quiet, and I want you to understand, this silence is not sadness, it is not loneliness, it is not a sign that something is broken in me. This silence is what 75 years of living sounds like when it finally gets to rest. When a man has said everything that needed to be said, held his children while they cried, stood at gravesides and held himself together, sat in hospitals and prayed without making a single sound, because that is what strong looked like back then. He does not owe the world more words. He has already given language its full weight. People mistake quietness for emptiness. They look at an old man sitting by the window and they think, "He must be lonely. He must be lost." They do not understand that some of us have finally learned the difference between speaking and being heard. For most of my life, I spoke plenty, but very few people were truly listening. And now, without saying a word, I find that people pay more attention than they ever did before. My silence makes them lean in. It makes them wonder. Good. Let them wonder. Because wisdom does not shout. It never did. The loudest person in the room is almost always the least sure of himself. And me? I have lived through enough to know exactly who I am, what I have done, and what I still carry with pride. I do not need to announce it. It shows in how I sit, in how I take my time, in the fact that I am no longer in a hurry to prove anything to anyone. When you have crossed 75 winters, you stop filling silence with noise just to make other people comfortable. That is their work now, not yours. Your only work is to be present in your own life, fully and without apology, in whatever form that takes. Some days that means laughter. Some days it means 2 hours of stillness with a cup of tea going cold on the table. Both are equally valid. Both are equally yours. Let them ask why you have gone quiet. Smile slowly, say nothing, and let the silence answer for you. Because a man who no longer needs to explain himself has finally found the most powerful voice of all. This expanded segment flows entirely as a first-person speech. No headings, no labels breaking the rhythm. Just one elder's voice moving naturally from challenge to memory, to quiet defiance, to earned peace. The tone stays seamlessly aligned with the other 5 key points, grounded, unhurried, and impossible to argue with. The closing line lands as a single standalone truth. No softening, no extra words. Just the weight of a man who has learned that silence in the right hands is the loudest statement of all. So now it is my way of doing things that bothers you. The way I fold my clothes, the way I take my tea, the way I wake at the same hour every morning, move through my morning the same way I have moved through it for 40 years. You look at me and you see habit. You see stubbornness. You see an old man who refuses to bend. Let me tell you what I see. I see survival. Every single one of these routines was built by hand, not chosen from a magazine, not copied from someone else's life. Built, brick by brick, year by year, through seasons that nearly broke me, and mornings I was not sure I wanted to see. The way I do things is not an accident. It is architecture. It is the structure a man builds around himself when the world gives him very little else to hold on to. When you had nothing, no certainty, no guarantee, no safety net, you found the things that steadied you, and you kept them, not out of fear of change, out of respect for what kept you standing. My routines are that. They are the small dignities I gave myself when dignity was not always easy to come by. The cup placed just so, the chair by the window at a certain hour, the walk I take whether the weather agrees or not. These are not the habits of a man who has given up on life. These are the habits of a man who has learned, through long and difficult experience, exactly what life requires of him, and exactly what he requires from life in return. Now someone younger comes along and says, "Why do you always do it that way?" As though my 75 years of trial and error were simply waiting for their correction. As though the wisdom I built slowly, at great personal cost, through failure and loss and getting back up again, could be replaced by a newer method, a faster way, a more convenient version. I have to smile at that. I genuinely do. Because there is something almost beautiful about the confidence of a person who has not yet been truly tested, telling someone who has survived everything that they are doing it wrong. I am not interested in defending my routines to anyone. I tried that once, explaining myself, justifying my preferences, softening my ways so others would not feel uncomfortable around them. That was exhausting work, and it produced nothing. Nobody who questioned me once stopped questioning me simply because I explained myself better. The questions just shifted shape, so I stopped answering. I kept my routines, and I let the questions dissolve on their own. Because here is what I know at 75 that I did not fully understand at 40. You will never satisfy someone who is uncomfortable with your stillness. Your peace threatens them. Your consistency unsettles them. The best thing you can do for yourself, and honestly for them too, is to continue. Keep the chair, keep the hour, keep the cup exactly where you like it. Let them ask why you do it that way. Carry on. The man who no longer rearranges himself to fit other people's comfort has finally stopped living someone else's life and started living his own. This segment speaks entirely in his voice. A 75-year-old man who has stopped justifying the architecture of his own life. The speech moves through three natural layers: what people see when they look at his routines, what those routines actually represent, and why he stopped explaining himself altogether. The closing line arrives without fanfare, just a single, unhurried truth that brings the whole segment home. When are you going to change? That is the question, isn't it? I have heard it in different mouths, wearing different clothes. Sometimes it comes gently, wrapped in concern, soft at the edges, delivered with a hand on the shoulder. Sometimes it comes harder, with frustration behind it, impatience barely held in. Either way, the question is the same, and either way, my answer has become the same too. A long breath, a steady look, and nothing more. Because I want you to think about what that question is really asking. It is asking a man who has lived through things you have not yet imagined, who has buried people he loved, who has rebuilt himself from nothing more than once, who has changed so many times already that the man he was at 25 would not recognize the man he became at 50. It is asking that man to change again, as though all of that becoming counted for nothing, as though arriving here, at this age, in this skin, with this particular understanding of the world, was not itself a form of completion. I am not a rough draft. I am not a project left unfinished. I am the final version, marked by everything I have lived through, shaped by every choice I made, including the ones I got wrong. And yes, I got things wrong, plenty of them. I was not always the easiest man to be around. I was too hard sometimes, too distant others. There were years I gave too much of myself to work and not enough to the people sitting across from me at dinner. I know that. I have sat with that knowledge for a long time, quietly, without needing anyone to remind me. A man who has truly reckoned with himself does not need to be told where he fell short. He already knows. He carries it, and he has learned what he could from it, and released the rest, because carrying everything forever is not wisdom. It is punishment. What I will not do, not anymore, is perform change for an audience. I will not pretend to be in the middle of becoming something new simply because it makes others feel better about the time they spend with me. That kind of change is not growth. It is theater. And I am too old and too tired and far too honest for theater. Real change, the kind that matters, the kind that costs something. I did that work in the dark, when no one was watching, when there was no credit to be earned from it. I changed my temper. I changed my pride. I changed the way I held my grief. I changed how I loved, slowly and imperfectly, but genuinely. I did not announce any of it. I simply became. And what I became is the man standing here now, unhurried, unashamed, and entirely finished with the business of shrinking himself to fit someone else's expectations of who he ought to be. A man who has already done the hardest changing of his life, in silence, at great cost, with no applause, does not owe the world another performance. He has already earned the right to simply be. This segment moves through the full arc of a man who has already changed, deeply, privately, at great cost, and now refuses to perform change as spectacle. The voice stays in that same unhurried, undefensive register established in the earlier key points, not angry, not bitter, just completely settled. The closing line doesn't explain itself. It simply stands, the way he does. Are you okay? 3 words, small enough to fit inside a breath. And yet, at 75, I have learned that those 3 words carry entirely different meanings depending on who is asking them, and I have learned, sometimes painfully, to tell the difference. There are people in my life, very few but they exist, who ask that question and mean every syllable of it. They ask it quietly, without urgency, without an agenda waiting on the other side. They ask it, and then they go still. They leave room for the real answer. They are not frightened by what I might say. They do not need me to say, "I am fine," so that their own day can proceed comfortably. Those people, I open the door for them. Slowly, on my own terms, but I open it. Because that kind of asking is rare, and it deserves to be met with honesty. But then there is the other kind, the asking that is really a performance of concern. The "Are you okay?" that wants only one answer. "Yes, I am fine, everything is well, do not worry about me." So the conversation can move on, and nobody has to sit inside anything uncomfortable. I used to answer that version too. I used to smooth it over, tidy myself up, present the version of myself that required the least from whoever was asking. I told myself it was kindness, and perhaps some of it was. But most of it was something else. A habit built over decades of being the one who held things together, the one who could not afford to fall apart, the one whose difficulty was an inconvenience to others. So I learned to make myself easy, to be okay on demand, to fold my real feelings quietly away so the room could stay light. I am done with that now. Not bitterly, I want to be clear about that. I am not sitting here with old anger about it. I simply understand at this age that protecting everyone else from the truth of how I feel is not nobility. It is self-abandonment dressed in good manners, and I have abandoned myself enough. What I have left, these years, this energy, this heart, belongs to the people who can hold it properly, the ones who ask and mean it, the ones who will sit with me in the hard answer instead of flinching away from it. So when someone asks if I am okay, I pause now. I look at them. And in that pause, I make my decision. Sometimes I share. Sometimes I smile and say very little. Both are honest. Both are mine to give or withhold as I choose. Because at 75, the most important boundary a man can draw is not around his property or his time, it is around his peace. Who gets to walk inside it? Who stands at the door? That is a decision no one else gets to make for him. Guard your peace like the rare and irreplaceable thing it is, because the man who has finally found his stillness owes it to no one, and shares it only with those who have truly earned the privilege of standing inside it. Watch more wisdom like this. One evergreen wisdom, stories and lessons for those who have lived, loved, and learned. Subscribe. Now this final key point carries the weight of a complete man, not guarded out of fear, but discerning out of wisdom. The speech moves through 3 quiet beats, recognizing the people who ask with genuine care, naming the habit of self-abandonment he's leaving behind, and arriving at a place of sovereign, unhurried choice. The closing line seals the entire script, not just key point 6, but all 6 together, with the one truth that ties them all. Peace, at this age, is sacred, and it belongs to him. The Evergreen Wisdom Channel card is included at the close, ready to invite viewers to stay in that world. The man who has raised children, buried grief, carried debt, swallowed pride, and still showed up, that man has nothing left to prove. Old age is not a waiting room. It is the reward. Guard your mornings, protect your stillness, love on your own terms. The questions will keep coming. They always do. But you, at 75, have finally earned the most powerful answer of all, a gentle smile and a turn of the shoulder. written with deep respect for every elder who gave everything and deserves everything in return.